The 12 Labors of Hercules, Part 4. The Erymanthian Boar. Welcome back, friends. Tonight we continue our journey through the 12 labors of Hercules, the greatest hero of ancient Greece. If you've been following along, you know that Hercules has already faced the invincible Nemean lion and the regenerating heads of the Lernaean hydra. He has captured the golden-horned Ceryneian hind after a year-long chase across sacred groves and moonlit valleys. And now, as winter approaches and snow begins to dust the peaks of the Peloponnese, King Eurystheus summons him once more to the palace at Turin's. The king sits upon his throne, smaller somehow than when Hercules first arrived. Fear has a way of diminishing men, and Eurystheus has grown ever more afraid of his cousin with each impossible task completed. The Nemean lion's pelt now hangs across Hercules' broad shoulders. The hero stands before the throne, patient and quiet, waiting for whatever trial comes next. Eurystheus does not meet his eyes. Instead, the king's gaze drifts toward the distant mountains visible through the palace colonnade. When he speaks, his voice carries across the throne room like wind through empty halls. He tells Hercules of a creature that dwells on Mount Erymanthos, far to the north in the wild highlands of Arcadia. A boar, he says. But not just any boar. A beast of tremendous size and ferocity that has been terrorizing the region, destroying crops, demolishing villages, and goring anyone foolish enough to venture onto the mountain's wooded slopes. The Erymanthian boar, as it has come to be called, is a monster born of the untamed wilderness. Its tusks are said to be as long as a man's arm, curved and sharp enough to split oak trees. Its hide is thick as leather armor, covered in coarse black bristles. It moves through the forest with impossible speed for something so massive, appearing suddenly from the underbrush like a living avalanche of muscle and rage. Many hunters have sought to claim it as a trophy. None have returned. Eurystheus wants the boar brought back alive, not slain but captured, bound and delivered to Turin so the king himself might see this terror of the north rendered powerless. It is a test of skill, not merely strength. Hercules accepts without hesitation, as he always does. He adjusts the lion's skin on his shoulders, lifts his great club, and turns toward the door. The journey north begins immediately. The road to Arcadia takes Hercules through landscapes that shift and change with each passing mile. He leaves behind the cultivated valleys of the Argolid, where olive groves stand in neat rows and shepherds tend their flocks on gentle hillsides. The land grows wilder as he travels northward. The road becomes a path, then merely a suggestion worn into the earth by the feet of deer and mountain goats. Pine forests rise dark and fragrant on either side. The air grows colder, sharper, scented with snow and stone. Hercules walks for days, sleeping beneath the stars when night falls, rising with the dawn to continue onward. He passes through small villages where people eye him with a mixture of awe and suspicion. They see the lion's skin and know who he is. Some offer food and shelter. Others simply point northward, toward the looming bulk of Mount Erymanthos, and shake their heads in warning. The mountain reveals itself gradually, growing larger with each day of travel until it dominates the northern horizon. Its peak rises white with early snow against the pale winter sky. Dark forests of pine and fir blanket its lower slopes. Higher up, the trees give way to rocky crags and windswept ridges where eagles circle on broad wings. It is beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are, beautiful and utterly indifferent to human concerns. At the base of the mountain, Hercules comes upon a settlement, barely worthy of the name. A handful of stone houses cluster together for warmth and protection. The people here are hardy folk, weathered by wind and altitude, their faces lined with worry. They tell Hercules of the boar's latest rampage. Just 3 nights ago, it descended from the heights and destroyed an entire season's worth of stored grain. It shattered the walls of a barn as if they were made of reeds. When men tried to drive it away with fire and spears, it charged straight through their line, scattering them like leaves, injuring 2 who were slow to flee. They ask Hercules if he truly means to hunt such a creature. He tells them he does, and more than that, he means to bring it back alive. The villagers look at one another with the quiet resignation of people who have seen too many brave souls venture up the mountain, never to return. But they offer what help they can. They tell him the boar seems to have a den somewhere on the eastern slopes, in a region of deep ravines and ancient forest where the snow lies thick even in autumn. They warn him that the terrain is treacherous, full of hidden drops and unstable scree. They wish him fortune, though their voices carry little hope. Hercules thanks them and begins his ascent as the sun climbs toward noon. The path is steep and the forest dense. Massive pines tower overhead, their branches interlaced so thickly that the forest floor lies in perpetual twilight. The silence here is profound, broken only by the occasional cry of a bird or the whisper of wind through high branches. Hercules moves carefully, reading the signs of the forest. Here, a tree trunk scored by massive tusks. There, a wallow where something large has rolled in the mud. The tracks he finds are enormous, each cloven hoofprint as wide as a dinner plate pressed deep into the soft earth. He follows the trail higher, into regions where the air grows thin and cold. The trees become sparse and stunted. Snow appears in patches, then carpets the ground completely. The tracks are easier to follow now, dark impressions in the white. They lead him through a maze of boulders and into a narrow ravine where sheer rock walls rise on either side and the sky is reduced to a ribbon of pale blue overhead. It is in this ravine that Hercules makes an unexpected discovery. The tracks are joined by others, not the prints of the boar but the marks of hooves that are too neat, too precise. And then he hears voices ahead, rough with laughter and thick with wine. He rounds a bend in the ravine and finds himself at the entrance to a cave. Firelight flickers within. The voices grow louder. Hercules calls out a greeting, announcing his presence rather than startling whoever shelters within. The voices fall silent. Then a figure appears at the cave mouth and Hercules feels a shock of recognition and joy. It is Pholus, a centaur, one of the wise and gentle race that dwells in these remote mountains. Hercules and Pholus met years ago, in the hero's younger days, and parted as friends. Pholus recognizes Hercules immediately despite the years that have passed. His weathered face breaks into a smile. He welcomes the hero into the cave, which is warm and dry, lit by a central fire. Other centaurs are there as well, part of Pholus's small herd. They make room for Hercules, offering him a seat near the flames. Pholus brings food, simple but nourishing. Roasted meat, bread, dried fruit. They speak of old times and new, catching up on the years since their last meeting. Hercules explains his purpose on the mountain. Pholus listens gravely, then nods. He knows the boar well. All who live on Erymanthos know it. The creature is a force of nature, wild and unstoppable. But Pholus believes that Hercules, if anyone, might succeed where others have failed. He offers advice. The boar is strongest when it has room to maneuver, when it can build speed and use its massive weight as a weapon. But in deep snow, its size becomes a disadvantage. It will tire quickly, flounder in drifts that a man might navigate more easily. The conversation continues as evening falls and the temperature outside drops further. At some point, one of the other centaurs suggests breaking out the wine. There is a special jar, sealed and stored deep in the cave. It is old wine, sacred wine, given to the centaurs long ago with instructions that it be opened only for the most worthy of guests. Pholus hesitates. There are customs and prohibitions surrounding such wine. But Hercules is indeed a worthy guest, perhaps the worthiest. Pholus agrees. The jar is brought forth and opened. The scent that rises from it is intoxicating, rich and complex, aged for decades in the darkness of the cave. Pholus pours a cup for Hercules, then cups for himself and his companions. They drink, savoring the deep flavors, the warmth that spreads through their limbs. The wine is strong, incredibly strong, but Hercules is accustomed to such things. The centaurs, however, are not. Wine affects their kind differently, more powerfully. What happens next unfolds with the terrible inevitability of tragedy. The scent of the opened wine drifts out of the cave, carried on currents of air through the ravines and forest. Other centaurs catch that scent, centaurs who are wilder, less civilized than gentle Pholus and his herd. These are creatures who live by instinct and passion, who have not forgotten the old wild ways. The sacred wine calls to something deep within them. They come in the night, arriving at the cave in a state of frenzy. They demand the wine, insist it is their right, that it belongs to all centaurs and should not be shared with outsiders. Pholus tries to reason with them, to explain that Hercules is a guest and a friend. But reason has no place here. The wild centaurs are beyond words, driven by the intoxicating scent and their own fierce natures. Violence erupts suddenly, as it so often does. The wild centaurs attack, wielding clubs and hurling stones. Pholus and his herd are caught between their wilder brethren and their honored guest. Hercules has no choice but to defend himself and his hosts. He takes up his bow, the great weapon whose arrows are still tipped with the Hydra's poisonous blood. He does not wish to kill, but the centaurs give him no choice. They charge again and again, heedless of danger. The arrows fly in the darkness. Each one that strikes brings instant death, for the Hydra's venom is beyond any cure. The wild centaurs fall, and their companions, seeing this, fall into an even greater rage. The battle spills out of the cave and into the snowy ravine. It is chaos and confusion, firelight and shadow, the screams of the wounded and dying echoing off stone walls. And then, in the midst of the fighting, disaster. Pholus, trying to understand how his friends could fall so quickly, pulls one of Hercules' arrows from a fallen centaur's body. He examines it in the firelight, marveling at how such a small thing could bring down one so strong. The arrow slips from his fingers. It falls, tumbling through the air, and pierces his hoof. Just a scratch, barely worth noticing. But the Hydra's poison needs nothing more. Pholus feels the venom's fire spreading instantly through his veins. He looks at Hercules with eyes full of sorrow and understanding, then collapses. Hercules rushes to his friend's side, but there is nothing to be done. The poison that makes his arrows so deadly is also irreversible. Pholus dies within moments, his last breath escaping in a sigh that sounds almost like forgiveness. The other centaurs, seeing what has happened, flee into the night. The ravine falls silent except for the crackle of the dying fire and the soft sound of snow beginning to fall. Hercules sits beside his friend's body through the long night. He does not weep, for that is not his nature, but grief settles over him like a weight. He has killed before and will kill again. That is the burden of heroes. But to have caused the death of a friend, even accidentally, is a wound that will not heal. When dawn comes, pale and cold, he buries Pholus in a place of honor, beneath a great pine where the mountain wind sings through the branches. Then, because the labor must be completed, because he has no choice but to continue, Hercules takes up his weapons and resumes his hunt. The snow that fell during the night has deepened, lying thick across the mountainside. His grief becomes a cold resolve. He will complete this task. He will capture the boar, not for Eurystheus but for Pholus, a way of honoring his friend's memory. He climbs higher, following the tracks that the fresh snow has made clear again. The boar has been active during the night, ranging across its territory, unaware of the tragedy that unfolded in the ravines below. The tracks lead upward, toward the summit regions where the forest gives way entirely to snow and rock. Hercules follows patiently, conserving his strength, letting the mountain itself become his ally. The landscape here is otherworldly. Wind has sculpted the snow into fantastic shapes. Ice clings to every surface, glittering in the morning light. The air is so cold it burns in the lungs. No trees grow this high, only the occasional twisted shrub clinging to life in some sheltered crevice. This is the realm of the boar, its fortress of winter and stone. Hercules finds the den in a hollow beneath a massive boulder. The snow around it is trampled and stained, littered with the bones of countless kills. The den itself is a darkness against the white, exhaling a rank animal scent. Hercules does not approach it directly. Instead, he begins to work, using his great strength to execute the plan that has been forming in his mind since his conversation with Pholus. He positions himself above the den and begins to shout, his voice booming across the mountainside, echoing from rock to rock. He beats his club against stone, creating a terrible din. The noise is designed to do one thing: drive the boar from its shelter. And it works. With a sound like thunder, the Erymanthian boar explodes from the den. It is even larger than the stories claimed. As big as a horse, perhaps bigger, with a massive wedge-shaped head and tusks that curve up wickedly from its lower jaw. Its small eyes burn with fury. Its breath steams in the cold air. It sees Hercules above it and charges immediately, its hooves churning the snow as it builds terrible speed. But Hercules does not stand and fight. Instead, he runs. He turns and flees up the mountain, bounding through the snow with the boar in furious pursuit. This is the crucial element of his plan. The boar is fast, incredibly fast, but Hercules knows this terrain now. He leads the creature higher into deeper snow onto steeper slopes. The boar follows, driven by rage, unable to let prey escape. Higher and higher they climb, Hercules always just ahead, the boar always just behind. But slowly, gradually, the deep snow begins to take its toll on the massive beast. It weighs so much more than a man. Each step requires tremendous effort. It begins to flounder, breaking through the crust of snow, sinking to its chest. Still it pursues, but its movements are growing labored. Foam flecks its jaws. Its breath comes in great ragged gasps. Hercules leads it to a place he scouted earlier, a high basin where the snow lies especially deep, fed by drifts from the peak above. Here, the boar finally becomes truly stuck. It thrashes and struggles, but succeeds only in exhausting itself further. Its massive strength, so terrible on solid ground, works against it here. Every movement drives it deeper into the imprisoning snow. Hercules watches from a short distance, waiting. He feels no triumph, only a quiet satisfaction that his plan has worked. When the boar finally stops struggling, too exhausted to continue, he approaches carefully. The creature tries to charge one last time, but it can barely move. Hercules is ready. He has prepared ropes and chains, scavenged from villages during his journey north. Working quickly but carefully, staying clear of those deadly tusks, he binds the boar. The ropes are thick and strong, passed around the creature's massive body, securing its legs. The boar fights the restraints, but it is spent. The climb, the deep snow, the sustained effort of the chase have drained even its prodigious strength. Within an hour, Hercules has the creature completely secured, wrapped in a cocoon of rope and chain. Now comes the hardest part. He must carry this monster down from the mountain and all the way back to Turins. The boar, even exhausted and bound, weighs as much as several men. But Hercules is the strongest being alive. He lifts the creature onto his shoulders, settling the weight carefully, finding the balance point. Then, step by careful step, he begins the long descent. The journey down the mountain takes days. Hercules moves slowly, resting frequently, ensuring the ropes remain tight. The boar recovers some of its strength and struggles periodically, but the bonds hold. At the cave where Pholus died, Hercules stops and pays his respects once more. Then he continues downward, through the forests, through the foothills, into the cultivated lands beyond. Word of his approach spreads before him. Villagers come out to see the impossible sight. Hercules carrying the living Erymanthian boar bound across his shoulders. They cheer and throw flowers. Children run alongside, eyes wide with wonder. The hero who has already completed 3 impossible labors has now achieved a 4th. The journey south to Turins passes in a blur of road and weather, small towns and river crossings. The boar grows calmer as it realizes the futility of struggle. It endures the journey with something approaching dignity, this wild king of the mountain brought low by human cunning and supernatural strength. Finally, after weeks of travel, Hercules arrives at the palace. He enters the throne room with the bound boar still on his shoulders. King Eurystheus sits upon his throne, surrounded by his court. He sees Hercules enter. He sees the massive, bristling creature the hero carries. and the color drains from his face. The stories say that Eurystheus was so terrified by the sight of the living Erymanthian boar that he leapt from his throne and hid inside a large bronze jar that was kept in the palace for storing grain. From inside the jar, his voice muffled and trembling, he commanded Hercules to take the creature away and release it somewhere far from the city. The fourth labor was complete, but the king had learned yet again that setting impossible tasks for Hercules yielded results he was ill-equipped to handle. Hercules did as commanded. He carried the boar to a distant wilderness and released it, cutting the ropes and chains. The great beast stood for a moment, perhaps as surprised by its freedom as it had been by its capture. Then it turned and lumbered away into the forest, disappearing into the shadows between the trees, returning to the wild places where it belonged. And Hercules returned once more to Turin's to await whatever labor King Eurystheus would devise next. 4 tasks completed. 8 remained. The path ahead was long, but Hercules walked it without complaint, bearing not just the weight of his labors but the memory of friends lost along the way. The price of being a hero, he was learning, was paid not just in sweat and danger but in grief. And so our 4th labor comes to an end. Rest now, friends. Let the image of snow-covered mountains and ancient forests carry you gently towards sleep. We will return before long to continue this journey, to follow Hercules through the remaining trials that await him. But for tonight, this story is complete. Sleep well.